A wonderkid is someone who shows promise and potential at a young age, but what if I told you about wonder unks, a genre of player who age like fine wine and hit their peaks later on in their careers? One of those players is Danny Welbeck, a player who, despite once being regarded as a wonderkid, had a few career lows and ended up as a free agent without a club aged 29, and now, aged 34, has just had his most productive goal-scoring season of all time. There is a pretty widespread idea within football that youthfulness is one of the best qualities. Maybe that's affected by modern day games such as FIFA and Football Manager, where wonderkids are more exciting than seasoned professionals, but Danny Welbeck is an example of that not relating to real life. So, let's talk about the rise, the fall, and the rise again of Danny Welbeck. But before we do that, I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, so if you like this sort of content, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. It helps the channel out massively. Anyway, to understand how Welbeck has just achieved his best goal-scoring season aged 34, we must go back to when a young striker bursting with energy came through the ranks at Manchester United all the way back in 2008. Born on the 26th of November 1988 in Manchester, Danny Welbeck grew up in a tight-knit community. His passion for football followed him early. Boots on, ball at the feet, every chance taken. He played in local youth teams, park matches, basically anywhere a goal was possible, like many kids around England and the world. And for him, that was everything he needed. He wasn't always the biggest, always the fastest, but from the first time that he stepped onto a proper training pitch, coaches saw something different. His movement, his nose and eye for goal, and more than anything, the way that he worked. He chased every ball and he made every run possible. As a teenager, Danny joined the youth academy at Manchester United. He rose through the ranks pretty quickly, scoring in youth fixtures, showing up in big youth matches, always pushing for more. And then came that big turning point in any footballer's career. It's the moment that separates the potential from something more, his senior debut. In August 2008, Danny Welbeck made his first team debut for Manchester United against Stoke, where he scored a pretty ridiculous 30-yard screamer aged just 17 to make it 4-0. But, of course, with early promise comes early challenges. Competition for spots at Manchester United in particular is brutal. For every chance Welbeck got, there were strikers ahead of him, established legends, big money signings. Some games he started, more he didn't. Some games he was substituted early, more he wasn't even in the squad. And why mention these early days? Because this sets up more. This is the foundational chapters where promises are made, talents are recognized, and challenges are faced. These often decide whether a player is going to become good, great, or simply get forgotten. 2008 had been the debut, but by the time that 2010 rolled around, Welbeck wasn't just a bright-eyed kid in the academy anymore. He was part of the first team rotation, training under Sir Alex Ferguson, surrounded by serial winners. Rooney, Giggs, Scholes, Ronaldo briefly before his departure. There were legends everywhere. And that kind of environment can do one of two things to a young player. It could go to their heads and crush them, or shape them into a way better player. And for Welbeck, he absorbed everything. But, like every other young talent at Manchester United, the reality comes quickly. Competition was relentless. The club was built on results, not sentiment. And as the squad evolved, Ferguson made the decision Welbeck needed minutes. Maybe those minutes can't be offered to him at Old Trafford. So, on the 25th of January 2010, Welbeck became Alex Ferguson's son's, Darren Ferguson's, first signing as the Preston North End manager, since he had taken charge earlier on in the month, signing on loan for the remainder of the 2009-2010 season. But this is where Welbeck experienced the first taste of what would really stop him from reaching where he could have in football. Injuries. And this particular incident required surgery, and Welbeck's loan was cut short on the 16th of March so that he could return to Manchester United for an operation. After recovery, Welbeck found himself out on loan again, this time at Sunderland, and that's where we saw the next version of Danny Welbeck. At Sunderland, he wasn't just a substitute, he was a starter. Trusted, relied upon, Steve Bruce gave him freedom, and with that, Welbeck began to evolve his game. He learned physicality. He learned to fight for space, to scrap for every ball, to run the channels endlessly. His pace, his pressing, his work ethic, they all exploded in that environment. And off the back of his Sunderland form, there were pretty widespread calls for Danny to get an England call-up. But injury struck again, leaving him sidelined for 8 weeks. Once he returned, he managed to pick up where he left off, but before he picked up another injury, resulting in him yet again having his loan cut short as he returned to Manchester United for treatment. Back at United, despite the injuries, Ferguson had seen enough. The loan had worked. Welbeck was deemed ready. 2011-2012 was his breakout season. Playing alongside Wayne Rooney, he looked like a player who had been there for years. The chemistry between the two, especially during United's title fight, was electric. And one of his defining moments was that goal against Manchester City in the FA Cup. A beautiful volley that screamed confidence. It wasn't just luck, it was Welbeck at full belief. He finished that Premier League season with 9 goals and a couple of assists, and something even more valuable, Ferguson's trust. Form at club level brought opportunity finally in the national setup, and in 2011, Danny Welbeck made his long-awaited England debut. Following that, at Euro 2012, he scored a sublime back heel against Sweden. Welbeck had arrived not just as Manchester United's future, but as England's present. But football doesn't care about fairy tales. 2013 brought changes. Ferguson retired, David Moyes came in, then Louis van Gaal, and each system meant new expectations, new styles, new obstacles. Welbeck was shuffled between a striker and a winger, sometimes in his natural position, sometimes not. And then, again, came the injuries. They were small at first, then they were persistent but defining. Hamstrings, knees, ankles, every time he built momentum, it felt like something or someone was just pulling him away. And that's gotta be frustrating, because for players like Welbeck, football is massively based off of consistency. Rhythm is everything. Confidence flows through having minutes. And when that stops, you start questioning yourself and other people start questioning you. He wanted to stay and he wanted to fight for his place, but football, especially at a club like Manchester United at that time, they don't wait for everyone. And then in 2014, everything changed. Manchester United signed Radamel Falcao, and Robin van Persie was still there. Welbeck's path was very much so blocked. So when Arsenal came calling, he made the decision to leave his boyhood club, and it didn't take him long to make an impact. In 2014, Danny Welbeck scored his first Arsenal hat-trick in the Champions League against Galatasaray. And just like that, he reminded everybody what he could be when given minutes and freedom. But behind the highlights, behind the goals, the same question kept following him. Could he stay fit long enough to fulfill his potential? Because just as he was finding form, just as Arsenal looked like he had made the perfect career move and he was on the perfect stage, his body began to betray him again. And that's where our story turns from rise to resilience. Every footballer fears one thing. It's the silence of a dressing room after everybody's gone home and you're sitting there staring at a taped up knee, wondering if you'll ever be able to play football the same way again. And unfortunately for Danny Welbeck in this story, that happens more than once. The 2014-2015 season had shown flashes of what he could be for Arsenal. The relentless movement, the pressing, the intelligence to link play and make others play better. He wasn't just a goal scorer, he was a connector, a facilitator. But then again came the first big blow. May 2015, a knee injury that ruled him out for the rest of the season and beyond. Arsenal fans had seen enough to know how valuable he was, but as the months dragged on, Welbeck's name faded from the matchday squads, the headlines, and even fan discussions. It was 9 months out, and then another setback. The rhythm was gone. And that brings us to February 2016. Arsenal versus Leicester City. Leicester, the fairy tale team, on their way to one of the greatest Premier League stories ever told. And for Arsenal, this was a must-win game. 90th minute, 1-1. Free kick to Arsenal. Mesut Ozil steps up, floats in a cross, and there is Danny Welbeck in the last seconds of the game. 2-1 Arsenal. 9 months out, 1 touch, 1 goal, 1 big moment of intent to show that Danny Welbeck is not fading. That was more than a goal. It was a man proving that he still belonged. You'd think that'd be the turning point, the comeback moment where everything clicks again. But as I said, football doesn't follow your scripts. Just 3 months later, another serious knee injury, this time a cartilage tear. The kind of injury that can really end a career and change the way you play the game. Surgery, rehab, months on the bike, then the slow walk back to running, then training alone. And, there's that echo chamber of, is he done? Off the back of his 155 days out injured, he was now injured again and would remain that way for another 239 days, missing 41 games in the process. By 2017, Arsenal was changing. Wenger was nearing the end. New faces were coming in, Lacazette, Aubameyang. The system evolved, and Welbeck wasn't guaranteed anything again. Freshly back from injury, he was no longer the main guy at Arsenal. And even from the bench, he made an impact. Europa League nights, cup ties, those graft-heavy performances where he'd chase every lost cause, press every backline, and remind fans why they loved him in the first place. But he wasn't the star anymore. He'd have to continue to fight for his place in the team up until November 2018. The Europa League, Arsenal versus Sporting Lisbon. Welbeck goes up for a header and he lands awkwardly, and as quickly as that, he is yet again facing a prolonged time on the injury table as he misses another 41 games over the span of 204 days. The players' reaction said it all. They knew, everyone knew that this was something big, and it was. It was a double ankle fracture. The season over, Arsenal career effectively finished. And then, when his contract expired in the summer, Arsenal let him go. He left the Emirates in the same way he had arrived. Humble, grateful, and pretty injury-riddled. And that leads us to 2019, where he signed for Watford. And while it wasn't a glamorous move, it was the perfect fit. Welbeck wasn't chasing the spotlight, he was chasing minutes to get back to what he could be in football. But again, it wasn't to be. Injuries affected yet another season where he only managed to net 2 goals, and he was yet again a free agent. And you'd have to think that by now, age 29 with a pretty horrific injury record, Welbeck's time in the sun was over. But fate wasn't done with him yet, otherwise I wouldn't be making this video. And that's where Brighton and Hove Albion come in. They took a punt. A team known for finding young hidden gems were looking to reinforce the club with a bit more experience and picked up Danny Welbeck, Adam Lallana and Joel Veltman to add to their dressing room. For most, it looked like the twilight of his career, but this was almost a reset button. It wasn't exactly the flashy career move or one that particularly sparked much interest outside of the Brighton space, but it ended up working out quite nicely for everyone involved. It was the perfect environment for a player who'd spent half a decade trying to fight his own body. Here he could just play. And despite the fact that he was initially only signed for just the 1 year, the fact that 5 years later he is still here shows how well it has gone. Under Potter, Brighton played brave football, passing through pressure, rotating positions, trusting intelligence over instinct, and that suited Welbeck pretty perfectly, because even when he had potentially lost half a yard of pace, his mind was still sharper than ever. He wasn't exactly going to be an explosive winger anymore, but he was now the thinking and knowledgeable striker, the one who made space for others, who link up play, and who would be able to press, not with just chaos, but with precision. And as a result of that, Welbeck was back to putting the ball in the net. He wasn't breaking many records, but he was doing what was needed of him. Nothing particularly spectacular, but a job. However, that would be enough for him to get another contract. And in those first few seasons, the injuries didn't exactly go away, but there wasn't anything as serious as some of the previous ones. But he was still out for a pretty decent portion of the season in 2021-2022. Then came Roberto De Zerbi, a manager who looked at players differently. He didn't just see the age, he saw intelligence. And for Welbeck, this was everything. De Zerbi gave him the freedom to roam, to link, to lead, and he wasn't just a forward anymore, he was a mentor, a team leader. And when Brighton qualified for Europe for the first time in their history, which if you would like to see more of, I have got a video on this channel that you can go and watch after this one, Welbeck was right there, smiling, celebrating, alive again. But it didn't stop there as we come to the present day, or more so last season, as Danny Welbeck has managed to rebuild himself from what was once a promising wonder kid who was heavily affected by injuries and turned into more of a what-if story, into a 34-year-old who just off the back of his best ever goal-scoring season, and is currently on 4 goals in 8 games this season, so he could even be on track to break it again. When you look back at Welbeck's career now, it's not just defined by numbers, not goals, not trophies, it's defined by that mental strength, the resilience, the ability to reinvent himself at every stage on the biggest stage, by surviving in a game that moves on so quickly and still finding a way to matter. From Longsight to Old Trafford, from Arsenal's highs to the treatment table lows, from Watford's grind to Brighton's rebirth. If you strip it all back, Danny Welbeck's story isn't about what could have been, it's about what was. A player who, despite facing some incredibly tough times, has managed to almost reinvent himself as what I would like to call a wonder unk. And if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content like this, please do consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel out massively. And let me know in the comments if there's anyone else in particular you would like me to do a video on. With all that being said, fade to black.